So welcome to the latest installment of the Plumley Speaker Series, sponsored by Betty and Bob Plumley. They couldn't join us tonight, but they send their regards, and we'll see them next time. I'm Gary Adler. I'm the Associate Director of Research here at the Institute for Advanced Catholic Studies. And you may have noticed it, but even without us planning it, the media and political worlds have continued to produce events that we could talk all night about. So luckily tonight we are joined by just the sort of scholar that can help us get through some of the din. As you'll see from Diane Winston's comments, such informed reflection is crucial, and the point of the speaker series is to help you to see the sort of scholarship that the Institute for Advanced Catholic Studies supports and wants to bring to the public. So as we get started, if you could do me a favor and make sure to take out anything that will ring and turn that all the way off. And then to introduce our speaker, I'd like to invite to the microphone the president of the Institute for Advanced Catholic Studies and Alton M. Brooks Professor of Religion here at USC, Father Jim Heff.
Thank you, Gary. Good evening, folks. Diane Winston currently holds the Knight Chair in Media and Religion at the Annenberg School for Communication and Journalism here at USC. And it would be perfectly right to describe her as a national authority on these issues. Otherwise, how would she have gotten the chair? Her current research interests are media coverage of Islam, religion, new media, and the place of religion in American identity. She's published widely. She's worn two hats in her life, which gives her a certain real credibility, one in the trenches as a journalist, and more recently, having received her doctorate from Princeton University in the study of religion, and before that, 2 master's degrees, one at Harvard Divinity School, coupled with a degree in journalism from Columbia School. These are very fine credentials, I would say. She has done a great deal of work. One of the books that brought her to national recognition was the great study she did on the Salvation Army. She's currently working on 2 books that will be published very shortly. One, the Oxford Handbook on Religion and the American News Media, that's coming out later this year, and the other, Heartland Religion, the American News Media and the Reagan Revolution. Now, on a more personal note, Diane and I met a long time ago, in 1997. Remember that great weekend we spent at that lodge? No, wait a minute. Let me put it in a different way. Each of us was invited to participate by the Lilly Endowment in a 3-year, 2 weekends a year conversation of scholars interested in the role of religion in higher education. And very shortly into that first weekend, quite honestly, I realized that we had a kinship on a lot of issues. And it was a wonderful experience, and I've kept track of her. And then when I realized I'm coming to USC and she was already here, it was perfect. So I'm delighted to bring to the podium Diane Winston, who will speak to us about religion and the media. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim, and thank you, Gary. It's such a pleasure to talk in my home institution instead of having to fly someplace to get there. So thank you for making this possible. And yes, Jim, it was a wonderful weekend at that lodge. I quickly realized you were one of the few people there who actually, had common sense as well as great intelligence. So yes, it was a match made in heaven. One that I don't tell my husband about. So what I wanted to do today was to talk with you a little bit about the history of religion in the news media. I know a lot of people have opinions about, what the news media does well and what it doesn't do well and how it doesn't cover things adequately and how it goes after, bishops and popes and rabbis. That's all true, and we can talk about it a little later. But what I wanted to do was give you a little background, because I think that religion and news has a long and fraught relationship that most people don't know about. In fact, at my school, Annenberg, when they teach history of journalism, I tell them, let me come in and tell you the real story. And so far, no one's invited me to do it. So News is an acronym for the 4 directions, and it's information that covers all corners of the globe. According to standard definition and contemporary practice, news is information that is timely, significant, controversial, and unexpected. News is reported weekly in news magazines, daily in newspapers, hourly on radio, instantaneously online. Ubiquity ensures its influence. News orders political priorities, it structures social concerns, it cements loyalties, and it promotes a sense of belonging to something other than oneself. Newspapers, writes scholar Benedict Anderson, provide remarkable confidence of community in anonymity, which is a hallmark of modern nations. I'll repeat that. Newspapers provide remarkable confidence of community in anonymity, which is a hallmark of modern nations. Or, as 1010 Wins, a New York radio station says, you give us 22 minutes, we'll give you the world. Religion performs similar functions of defining and ordering identities and worldviews, which helps explain why the two have such a complicated relationship. In today's world, religion is news when it meets journalistic expectations of timeliness and relevance. But in other periods, in other places, religion was the news. That is, events were newsworthy because they had teleological significance. Centuries before Christians adopted the term good news, gospel, good news, to convey the novel and world-changing message of their faith, men and women used oral, pictorial, and architectural media to share news about the seen and unseen worlds. These reports can still be read in such places as the Lascaux cave paintings, the Giza Pyramid Complex, and the Parthenon. When the British came to the New World, they too found affinities between the visible and invisible realities, which they construed as evidence of God's presence. Strange weather, bumper crops, and misshapen births were news, signaling divine response to the settlers' attempts to build a holy commonwealth. Initially, this kind of news was reported in sermons, almanacs, and broadsheets. But the how and why of Puritan reports has echoed down the generations, influencing even today's style and substance of reporting. We can see its influence in reporters' preoccupation with current events. What happened? What's changing? As opposed to European news, which is more interested in change over time. We can see it in the reliance of facts in the natural world, which is what we call objectivity. And we see it in the tendency to write from on high, as if stories can be true with a capital T. Just as religion influenced the news, so has journalism affected the shape and evolution of religion in America. The who, what, why, when, and how of news gathering and the constraints of journalistic storytelling have influenced how religious groups present themselves to the public or not. Press coverage can make or break a religious leader, movement, or institution. Yet playing the news game can also distort religious teachings. Especially vexing to religious sensibilities is the press's fickle nature. A group that receives good coverage on Monday can't be guaranteed similar treatment on Tuesday. But in an increasingly secular society, the press is the main avenue for religions to reach beyond their pews. Religion and news are bound by a relationship that is at once mutually constituent and at the same time militantly competitive. Moreover, they both have played important roles in American nation building. The Puritan notion of a city on a hill or a New Jerusalem was just one of several religious visions for the New World. Anglicans in the South, Catholics in the West, Jews in the Mid-Atlantic told somewhat different stories. Separately and together, they chronicle a chosen people with a divine calling to a promised land. This mandate, shared in the news of the day, gave the colonists a sense of common cause and a unity of purpose. Religion was at the heart of that mission, and stories about religious issues, leaders, and conflicts were among the first news to travel through the colonies. Over 300 years, the relationship between religion and news has waxed and waned, but several factors remain constant. Religion has always been part of the news, and its coverage always reflects secular worldviews. Depending upon that worldview, religion falls in between two poles, which sociologists describe as substantive and functional, but I prefer to say beliefs and behaviors. Functional coverage, or coverage of behavior, looks at what religion does and how it functions in society. The substantive perspective, or the perspective of belief, treats religion as a transcendent phenomena, focusing on supernatural and experiential dimensions. Puritans, seeking to integrate belief and behavior, fused the two in their reports on natural occurrences. Since then, however, editors have sought the best balance for the market. In the 19th century, that meant scandal, heresy, hypocrisy, and soul-saving. Sensational stories that depicted the clash between belief and behavior. In the 20th century, sensationalism has remained a religious narrative, but it has been superseded often by conflict. Conflict within a religion, between religions, or among political opponents motivated by contrasting political identities. Now, I want to go over a little bit of the background in history. In the spring of 1721, a smallpox epidemic gripped Boston. It was the sixth time that the deadly disease had ravaged the population since its settlement. 50 years earlier, 700 people, or 12% of the population, had died from the plague. This time it would strike 6,000 of the city's 10,000 residents and claim 800 lives. Even more would have died if Cotton Mather, who was the leading Puritan cleric at the time and an amateur scientist, had not pushed for inoculation. The practice was new in the Western world. Mather had read about injecting healthy people with small amounts of a disease, and he knew slaves had been inoculated in Africa. But when he suggested the idea to Boston's doctors, all but one of the city's 10 physicians nixed it. Can you hear me in the back? Okay. However, Mather and his backers persevered, and as the debate spread, medical fault lines paralleled religious and political divisions. Anglicans led the fight against inoculation, arguing that it was not only medically unsafe, but also theologically unsound, since it challenged God's sovereignty over human life. Eager to end support, the anti-inoculation camp started the New England Current, a newspaper dedicated to attacking Mather, his allies, and their campaign for preventive medicine. Just as an aside, the New England Current was edited by James Franklin, who is Benjamin's older brother, and it's there that Benjamin first got his start in newspapers. Supporters of both the British episcopacy and crown, the Current valorized divine authority and an acceptance of human limits. In response, other papers repeated Mather's contention that God gave human beings the ability to reason so that they could improve their condition. Thankfully, Mather triumphed when the facts showed the truth of his speculation. The fatality rate for those who were inoculated was much lower than for those who had not received shots. But even after the epidemic ended, the New England Current kept up the fight. Now, America's first newspapers had preceded the Current by about 30 years, but they were similarly steeped in political and religious perspectives.